with Majune Socrates. He is known to us as a tutorial fellow at the University of Nairobi. And our topic of discussion this day will be academic research. And we'll be getting to acquaint ourselves with one or two variables when it comes to academic research, for that matter. And this will be done with the guidance of Paul Wambua, who is our moderator, and our main discussant, who is Majune Socrates. Majune, if you can hear me, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Wambua. Kindly confirm whether you are hearing me. Good evening. Kindly confirm whether you are hearing me, please.
I can hear you. Can you
Sorry,
get me?
Yes, I can. I'm sorry I told this. Of all days, this is the day Kenya Power decided to switch off electricity. From around 3 p.m. I've not been having power, so I'm even joining the meeting using my phone. So it's my prayer that power will return very soon so that I can be able to put on the video and people are able to see me. So thank you.
Fair enough. I mean, we can all understand the inefficiencies that Kenya Power avails to us at their own convenience. But then again, there isn't really much we can do. So we'll bear with that. I think we'll just go ahead and begin our discussion. And basically, as the invitation would have it, the panel wanted a discussion with you on academic research. And this is premised on the fact that as a panel, we are interested in intellectual discourses which are of help to us as a community of thinkers, as we like to identify ourselves. So, with your indulgence, I would like you to introduce us to this elephant called academic research by way of explaining it to us in simpler terms and with your experience and how this has been to begin with. Majune.
Okay. Thank you very much, Wambua. Please just confirm whether you are hearing me before I proceed.
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So, once again, I'm Socrates Majune. I'm a tutorial fellow at the School of Economics, where I mainly teach history of economic thought and institutional economics. My areas of specialization are in international trade, specifically things to do with trade in farms and also trade in services. Also, history of economic thought is one of those areas I've specialized in. And sports economics is one of those areas that I've also specialized in. So I'm also just about to complete my PhD. So my thesis is on issues of trade in services in Kenya. So I'm very grateful for this invitation, and I'm happy with the work that all of you guys are doing. These are some of the things I used to dream of while doing my undergraduate studies at the University of Nairobi. And I'm happy that we've had a lot of youngsters who have now taken it up, and you are doing something that a good job. So on to what you've requested me to do. I'll briefly just talk about what I think is academic research, and then I guess the next session will be questions and answers. There are things I've prepared. I expect possibly some of the things that are prepared for on people will ask questions around them, then I'll elaborate. So in a nutshell, academic research is purely research that is more of appropriate in an academic setup. As you know, there are several types of research. There's a research which is relevant for the NGO world. There's research which is relevant for the corporate world. There's also research which is relevant for multinational organizations, for instance, the World Banks and the IMFs and a lot of these multinational organizations. And then we have this academic research, which mainly entails several things. So for academic researchers or academicians are basically measured by several yardsticks for you to know someone is really an academician. Number one, academic research is research that is targeting journals, peer-reviewed journals. It's also research that can also be in the nature of data analysis. And when you talk about data analysis or issues to do with data, academic research can purely just be dealing with modeling. When you look at the data, you are either dealing just with the modeling, and here you are able to develop a certain model and execute the commands if you're using Stata or whichever statistical software you're using. So that becomes academic research. The other side of data analysis, which is part of academic research, is the programming part. There are some of you who are possibly more interested in programming. You're also interested in computer science, or you got yourselves into economics and you thought, I think I'll have done well in computer science. All is not lost. You will actually choose to do academic research by purely being a programmer. You often see people who are programmers for instance, a software like Stata, a software like R. Those ones are also doing academic research. The other part of academic research is theoretical modeling. And under theoretical modeling, there are two ways. Either you are modeling micro and macro theory, which means that your research is purely like, for instance, formulation of growth models, the way Robert Solow sat down and decided, okay, this is how GDP is formed, and these are the factors that determine GDP. So you become a theoretician, just a theoretical. When people see you, Esther, they know this one. If you want to conceptualize an idea, Esther is very good at playing around with algebra and playing around with topology and real analysis to formulate a model. The other part is the theoretical, but from an econometrics perspective. There are now people who are pure econometricians, where your work is just you're an academic researcher, but then you're just focusing on econometrics and the theory side of it. And then, of course, now there are a lot of other fields that we have. For instance, we now have public sector economics, we have transport economics, we have international trade economics. We then have a lot of people who just research around those areas, and they are either doing the data analysis part of it, they're also doing maybe theory part of it. So that's what I'll respond to you as academic research. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, it's quite enlightening, and from economic sense, because many of us here are economists, and you've really captured that well. And it's my understanding that academic research is a core foundation of knowledge, and that is both for scholarly purposes and to the academy. Aspects that come with academic research. What other importance can we attach to academic research besides just being foundational in knowledge?
Sorry, I lost you a bit. I beg your pardon. I think there's a few seconds which you hang there. Yes, please.
Oh, sorry about that. There was also an intervention that you should consider raising your voice a bit from some of the members here. My question was, besides research being a foundation of knowledge, what other importance would you ascribe to academic research?
Sorry, if I understand your question, you are talking more of the importance of academic research, or
Yes, importance of academic research.
okay, there are several ways that academic research can actually be important. Of course, number one, a lot of academicians struggle or try to really get into very, very top journals, which if you publish there, number one, it comes with the recognition of you publishing in some of these places. It's very, very hard for you to get your work in some of these platforms. So it builds a profile, or your profile as someone who is a serious academician. And then also number two, it's also expected to be a signal. The importance of doing good academic research is that it's expected to be a signal to sometimes even potential employers. We've had people, or there are some opportunities that I've gotten myself, consultancy opportunities mainly, because of the work that I've done. And this is what happens most times, Esther, Wambua, and all the participants that are here. And all the participants that are here. What happens a lot is, for instance, if today the World Bank approached you and said, Esther, we are considering to have you as part of our team to consult ABCD, most likely they will request, Esther, could you please send us some of your work so that we see how you do your work? So that means that that's how academic research actually sells you. If you do a very good job, it's automatically a signal that you are able to do a good work. Another importance of academic research is it also exposes you. I hope someone will ask a question around this, or I anticipate I'll explain it later on. But I've been able to travel to countries to attend conferences and also to present because of academic research, which is not quite often in some other possibly other fields. So you have an opportunity of traveling, meet with Nobel Prize winners. Sometimes you meet with people you really admire so much, and that's what you really feel. These are the fruits of academic research. So attending conferences, also consultancies, because at the end of the day, you are mainly interested in seeing how best can I also possibly live a better life or make money out of this academic research. So consultancies for us academicians should be the most important thing. And you'll find that academicians who are really good, you find or people who have really done it quite well as academicians, you find they are possibly getting consultancies which are paying them as high as even $500 per day. That's around 50,000 shillings per day. So imagine if that consultancy or that assignment is going for a year or whatever, someone should be able to really reap a lot of money, because people are also interested in seeing how best can my work be translated into money, and that's part of the things. I think lastly is importance of academic research is also now awards. For instance, the awards that I've so far gotten. It seems someone's mic is on, please. Wambua, are you hearing me? Possibly you could help me mute someone's mic.
James, please mute your mic. James Ejakite, please.
Okay, thank you. So I was saying the other importance of academic research is through awards, and awards could be like the one that I've won, which are purely related to organizations. There are also journals which usually give awards to good papers, best papers. I know of some of your colleagues here who got some awards from Kenya Institute of Public Policy Research, KIPRA, the World Bank and the IMF, plus many other organizations usually call for essays for people to at least try and write about a certain topic or issue. You find they usually give awards, and some of those awards come with a financial, with a monetary. You also have money. So I'm thinking those are the, in many words, those are the importance of academic research.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, thank you. You mentioned in particular those awards, and I was wondering, perhaps this is my own conviction, or it's not really the case. But don't you think that the award factor in these, I mean, essentially how these awards are administered to different people based or premised on their research, don't you think it contributes to functional sensibility in that this research is, I mean, functionally just done for specific awards, or does it take out the real gist of academic research?
I request if you could please clarify your question.
Um, with these awards, you mentioned the awards, and by the way, congratulations on your awards. You are becoming more of a serial winner.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. So my question is, with these awards, uh, they are opening up. We have a lot of awards which are coming up. Do you think that they sort of take away the main purpose of academic research, in that people are writing functionally and, I mean, in a subjective manner, just for the purposes of the awards?
Okay, I now get your question. Actually, whatever you are saying is not true. I'm sorry to say that. What happens is this, for instance, all these awards that I've won, do you know my initial conception was to write the papers to send them to a journal. That was the initial idea. Then you come across this advert here, or this call for papers, or this kind of competition here. Then it just finds you ready. You have your paper which is ready purposely, and then you say, let me submit it there. So that's why I'm saying possibly what you are saying is not true, because the academic research that is there is most of us actually work hard. For instance, in academia, you are respected by the quality of papers you write, and also where you actually publish your papers. So most of us work hard to ensure that we get our works in certain places. But that does not mean that if today, Wambua, you've written a paper, it does not mean that you cannot send it to a certain conference. If you've seen a conference which is whose theme is relevant to the work that you are doing, it does not mean that you cannot send your work to a certain for a certain competition. It does not mean that you cannot enter yourself into a consultancy, because all these factors, for instance, conferences, the awards, and whatever, all these factors help you improve the kind of work that you are writing. At the end of the day, you attend conferences. In as much as you think your work is good, you attend your conference, you get comments, and that's how you actually get to improve your work. so that when it reaches that time where you submit your work for competition in an award, or you submit your work for publication now in a journal, you find that the quality is really, really improved. So I don't think it's in any way waters down the quality of research. I don't think so, because at the end of the day, you are working hard to get into certain conferences. You are working hard to win certain awards, but at the same time also working hard to also get your work to certain journals. And my thinking is possibly winning some of these awards also signals that actually your work is good. If policymakers found it quite useful, or if fellow academicians found it quite useful, then there's nothing bad about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. My other question would be on the research space itself. For some of us who want to get into academic research, and we really have no particular know-how on how the research space is, and it becomes particularly challenging because you are coming from a point of particular knowledge. I mean, having studied research methods in class, and therefore you think you have all these ideas you want to venture into, do academic research on, but really we I would beg to say, this is in quotes, that the research space is not skewed to our advantage, and not that it should be, but there should be a particular way in which that it's sort of opened up and it's accessible to us young scholars. I mean, you are one commendable young scholar who is making it big and ripping it big. So what would you say about the research space in terms of, for example, collaborations, in terms of doing it cross scholarly, where you take different scholars and you do research with them, or even interdisciplinary, economics and politics. You are talking about policymakers and how they view research, for example, and also research between institutions. How is the research space according to you?
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. I foresee that my answer could be a bit lengthy for this question, because you had the way you've asked it. I had also prepared something about it. So to begin with, when it comes to the know-how, I'll talk now as a student. I did my bachelor's of economics in statistics there at the School of Economics. I've also done my MA economics still at the same school, and also now currently doing a PhD. And I think before I go far, I would like to apologize. I think I heard you saying that my voice might be low. Unfortunately, I'm using my phone. Those who are possibly joined late, I'm having a blackout. So I beg your pardon. I would really have loved to even put my video on, but I'm having a blackout, so I'm even using my phone. So one of the key things that is there is I noticed that a lot of our programs, and I'm very sorry to say this, a lot of our programs are purely exam oriented. And I noticed this challenge, especially after my undergraduate. You've come from there, you have your first class, but then what I realized, what employers want is this Wambua. If they give you a task, can you convert that A you got in my history of economic thought class? Can you convert that A you got in my institutional economics class into now real life issues and application? I'm also sorry to say this, because I've interacted with colleagues who have mainly also been through a lot of private universities. I think private universities have really tried to really build or mold some of these research skills from their students. You often find students who are given term papers. You are sometimes very hard questions. You really have to sit down. You're forced to think. Okay. When I got into the system, Those are some of the things that I really purposed to try and change. And if there's any of you here who has attended my class, I'm thinking one of the things I've really tried to really work very, 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 very hard to do is to expose students to journals. What I've always tried to do is to give students journal papers. You read the journal paper and then summarize it in your own words in one page. That helps you to start thinking critically and purely have an understanding how best can now build my research skills. And then another thing is I'm usually a bit very harsh, especially when it now comes to the final term paper. I expect that after the review of the papers that we've had, I expect that small things like plagiarism should not be there. Small mistakes like you don't know how to reference, you don't know how to do an in-text citation. Those are not things that, those are things that should not, mistakes that should not be made. So my understanding has always been that these are some of the things that hopefully when you come out of my classes, you acquire some of these skills, you get into any place you're given a lot of research assignments you should be able to do. And then, of course, you'll be having people who are now guiding you on more advanced things. But the thing which is usually a bit disappointing also, I usually ask students in my first classes, what expectations do you have of me as a teacher? And a lot of guys are just, we want to pass exams. I don't know, be a good guy, come to classes. And I'm like, come on. I usually call the class reps. I'm like, this is the best you guys can tell a lecturer. Surely someone has asked you, what expectations do you have of them? Of which later on I tell them is, if it were me, for instance, I attended your class, um, I've attended your econometrics class. I expect at least at the end of the lecture, can I get some skills of data analysis skills? Can I also get some skills of interpretation of results? Can I get some skills of critical thinking? As opposed to just getting that A, and that's the best that you can actually say. So um, the the policy field in terms of what you can do, personally I feel it's number one thing of us who are trainers, who are your teachers, and then number two is now what you yourself can do with the reality on the ground. And here I really want to be very realistic, and I'll say some of the things that have possibly worked for me, what I think now as an individual, because it will take a lot of work for yourself as an individual. So possibly to penetrate into this academic research, there are certain attributes which someone really has to have, and it will be good if you learn some of these things as early as possible so that you adopt them. Number one, the art of anticipation. Those of us who watch football, you'll know that Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo are top goal scorers because the way these guys position themselves and really, really anticipate things to happen, and you just find the guy has scored. It is the same thing, and it's also what politicians actually apply. Any good politician is usually very strategic, and they anticipate certain things, and that's what they really, really try to apply. So anticipation in terms of academic research is this, and this is what really, really works for me. These are some of the things that I do. At the beginning of the year, you look at it and you realize there are certain conferences which you've always liked to go to. There are possibly certain fellowships which you've always liked to attend. So at the beginning of the year, for instance, you realize there's this conference by the Econometric Society, which usually happens at around June. There's this conference by ABCD. Then you need to think, can I develop a piece of paper which is around this conference so that the time that conference calls for applications, it finds me ready? That's the kind of anticipation that I mean here. We have, for instance, COMESA. Those of us who are in the COMESA countries, we also have regional bodies like the EAC. They usually call for papers and whatever. Can you really anticipate what they are likely to do? Right now, a lot of papers are about COVID-19. can you get a paper which is ready about COVID-19, so that the time COMESA calls, we are calling for papers ABC, they find that you almost have your paper around 99% ready, as opposed to waiting for the advert for you to start. Those are things you have to do yourself. Thing number 2 is excellence. I can assure you, excellence is not something that someone can teach you. I think it's a personal decision. And in academic research, some of the things that you can apply to become excellent at your work is, number 1, read the right things. Those of you who have attended my classes, I'm usually very, very, very strict on the quality of work. I've always told guys, please, in your assignments, I don't want to see citations of, I don't know, this website, Wikipedia, whatever. Those are usually personal opinions, but can you get journal papers? Because they're usually thoroughly reviewed, and especially journal papers is in top places. What happens for myself when I start writing, I usually get papers which are from top-rated journals. You even just see how the guys write, how they start the arguments, how they proceed with it. And you also try and apply it yourself for your work. And those are things about excellence which someone cannot teach you. You really, really have to try yourself. This is because at the beginning, I have my senior colleagues who used to tell me, your English is bad. And I'm like, you guy, I passed English quite well. What are you trying to tell me? I think I scored a good grade in English in high school. What exactly are you trying to tell me? What they mean is that it's not that you don't know English. You are very good at your English. The thing is, they cannot read your work and see a scholar writing your arguments. And a lot of it is because arguments are made in a very subjective way, not an objective way. And some of these things you might not know until you start reading at the right places. So what I'll advise, the way we used to be told in primary school, if you want to be a good writer, read books, read good books, books by so on. So it's the same thing also for journal. And preferably here, read journals from very, very top 5, those top journals. There's a reason why people publish in those places, and there are very few, and that's so. It's because of the way things are written. The language is quite important. The other key is just being keen on what people are doing. So here you part of the excellence means is, for instance, one of the few times participants, I asked myself a lot of questions. I even doubted whether I was an economist. I went to a conference in Morocco. We had a Nobel Prize winner there in 2019. And I saw my colleagues from other universities, the Harvards and MITs, what the guys were publishing and what they were presenting. I was really shocked. I really left that meeting really asking myself whether exactly I know economics or I'm just doing my own things. So that tells you that. So one of the key things that I came out with from that conference is, number 1, there are certain softwares, for instance, these people use in their presentations. There's a software called LaTeX. Here, a lot of us use PowerPoints and whatever. And it's the same thing also in terms of writing. A lot of them use LaTeX. A lot of them do very, very thorough research, especially when it comes to data analysis. So one of the key things, when I came back to Nairobi, I told myself, I think I want to apply ABCD from what I learned from this conference. And that's why sometimes I don't get shocked when you find you've sent your work, you've won a certain award. You don't get shocked because you really have to try. You always need to know that those are the standards that have been set by these guys. If you're not doing what they're doing, then there's a high chance you not reach there. And that's about excellence, which is a personal decision. No one will tell you, Wambua, now do your work in LaTeX, do your work in whatever. And it helps you because the moment you get now subsequent conferences that I've attended, especially in 2020 and this year, and some of the works you get, you are working with other colleagues, maybe at the World Bank, you find you meet the expectations. You are bumper to bumper with them. They don't feel like, this guy studied at University of Nairobi and some of us studied here. You don't feel that kind of difference. And that tells you you are really on the right track. The other thing to do with excellence is data analysis. I must emphasize, you really have to endeavor. And one of the key things I tell guys is start with the basic things. For instance, are you comfortable, for instance, doing time series data analysis in starter, cross-sectional data, blah, blah, blah. And then you now start moving to advanced areas, which I'll explain a bit later. The other thing is teamwork. You touched about it. And teamwork here can be in two ways. It can be with your peers, and it can also be with some senior people. At the beginning, I must admit that you'll be very, very lucky to get senior people who can act like mentors and also guiders for you. You really be very lucky, especially if you get senior people who are also into research. Some of these senior people can be fellow researchers you meet in conferences, or some of them you can even contact them just via email and whatever. And some of them could be your own lecturers. So let me come and say, you really need to be also very keen on who are these senior people you really want to work with. The truth is this, Wambua and all participants, even among lecturers, those of us who are interested in academic research, there are lecturers who are more into just teaching and they are very comfortable with that. There are lecturers who are more into consultancy work, which means they possibly are not so much into the academic research, but then they prefer doing the consultancy work. You really have to take time and read through people's CVs and understand, if Esther today I want to be a good, for instance, econometrician and I write papers in econometrics, can Socrates be the right person? If I look at my CV, I'm just doing my own things, I'm more of into consultancy, whatever. If you're coming to me as I'm your senior, but you're in the wrong place, I will not help you really reach the objective that you really want to reach. And it also happens the same way. When it comes to those ones for emails, let me tell you a real life story. So when I was doing my master's, I did a model called survival analysis. And I looked around at the University of Nairobi. It was very hard to really get people who really understood what I was doing, especially when it came to analysis. So what happens is I went to journal papers. Most of these authors have their contact details there in journal papers. And then I started emailing them, introduce yourself, I'm so and so, I would like to do ABCD. Read your work, and I'm requesting if you could really, really assist me on ABCD. You find that that's how I got one or two people, very senior professors, who are willing to share their starter do files and also give illustrations. And then the other thing is, a lot of them now we kept into contact, and that's how I even started co-authoring with some of them. And to me, it's more of a blessing because these are people with very big names, and you just met via email and whatever, and that's how you really kept in touch. And those are your seniors. So that's about teamwork, especially with senior people. But I must also warn, some of the challenges you will face, especially with the senior people, is this is what I found myself. Not so many of them are really willing to possibly co-author or partner with you. When that happens to you, Wambua, please don't feel bad. No one actually owes you anything. That's the reality I've come to live with as I've grown up. No one owes you anything. There are those who will accept your request. There are those who will not accept. The same way yourself, there are people who request things from you, you'll accept. Some you not accept. And you really, really respect if that's someone's perspective. But if you get especially senior people who are well accomplished and are willing to work with you, that's you really need to thank God. Among peers, some of the key things you really need to watch out is have a colleague whose objective is the same as yours. For instance, at the beginning, some of the colleagues are published with my own peers. We, for instance, at the beginning of the project, we say we want to send this work to a certain journal. It means we have to meet the conditions for the quality of that journal. And to know the quality of a journal, download some of their papers, read them, and then it gives you a hint of what exactly you really need to measure with. So if colleagues are not willing to do that, because to publish in some of these journals, it means that you have to take time, teach yourself data analysis, teach yourself, there are a lot of things you really need to teach yourselves. So if colleagues don't have the stamina and the focus and whatever, please don't waste your time with such a colleague. And here I must admit that when I began, I had a colleague who, I'll say, you need someone who will die with you. I have a friend of mine when I began my first paper that I published. I will face a lot of challenges in data analysis, especially when it just comes to cleaning the data and also organizing that data. This guy was very willing. We will spend a lot of hours. We spend a lot of money in hotels, just sitting and going through it. And when I look back, I say, that's the kind of friend you really need. You're really looking for a peer who's really willing to author with you. That's the kind of person you really, really, really need to have. And you have the same energy when you agree on something. All of you are able to achieve it. And that's it. The other main important thing is this. And these are things, I'm still talking about things you can do yourself. Identify an area of research that interests you. I can assure you, Wambua, it's very hard for you to tell me that you love everything in economics. There are things in economics which I never bother myself about, but if it comes to, for instance, issues of international trade, I will wake up at whatever time to actually read that kind of work. And identifying the area of interest helps you know, for instance, who are the experts in that area, and practice makes perfect. The more you continue writing about that area, the more you become better in whatever. For instance, now, if it comes to international trade, if you've chosen that international trade is your interest, you decide now, let me see, what are the key things for you to do in international trade? Okay, you start with, for instance, just writing a small paper and a basic analysis, maybe just about a country, what determines trade, for instance, in Kenya. You apply something like the gravity model. When you say tick, I can do the gravity model comfortably, you now start moving to now other complex things. We currently have people who are doing computable general equilibrium modeling. There are people who are doing survival analysis, partial equilibrium modeling. But you start with those basics, you understand them, and that's how you actually become very, very good at some of these things. And these are things you decide on your own. So identifying the area of interest actually really, really, for me, I think that's what has really worked so well for me. And it helps you to be a little bit more focused, and you easily have an idea of where you really want to go to, as opposed to if you don't know the area of research interest. The other thing, I can't fail to reiterate the aspect of networking. Networking here for scholars, it could be through conferences. I've personally gotten a lot of networks, or a lot of assistance through the people I've met in conferences. I've also talked about the email that you can reach out. It's not a must that you meet with someone face to face. I've just given you an illustration of my master's, how I reached out to some of the professors about some of this, requesting them for some guidance on analysis. And that's how we still kept in touch. And you find when they offer to co-author with you, it's a big honor. It's not something that is small. And it's through that communication. Preferably, please use your student email address, because you will begin by introducing yourself as a student of School of Economics, University of Nairobi, or whichever school or whichever university. Please use your student email address or whatever. That looks more official than your Gmail and Yahoo. Of course, the other networking could be through friends, and I can't reiterate the kind of friends you really need to keep, especially if those you want to work with, collaborate with in academic research. The other thing is, please don't put money ahead. Don't be so money oriented at the beginning. Developing skills takes time. Because what happens is with economics is economics requires you to have a lot of skills, and especially academic research. Number one skill is writing. I've told you writing is not easy. Those of you who have attended my classes, you will see that writing your term paper is not easy. And you can still write that way. When you now want to publish, you have to take more and more time to really revise it and whatever. Writing is not easy. Number two skill you need is data analysis. Possibly some of you have never faced Stata and whatever or R. It's your first time. It really takes time to develop those kinds of skills. Number three, critical thinking. How do you interpret your results? There's a way if you sit with someone who is more experienced, when they interpret results, you can see that side of experience that you really don't have. These things really take time, and you can't really start by putting money yet you don't have the skill. You can't start on that kind of note. And then the other thing is, please don't refuse assignments. Wambua, this now very, very practical, because there are times you'll find people approaching you, Wambua, do you know something, gravity model? I have this data, I want to do gravity modeling. What happens in reality is that sometimes we are curtailed by the kind of exposure that we have. Maybe you've never been exposed by your teachers or anyone about gravity modeling and whatever. My advice is this: if that assignment is given and you have time, for instance, someone wants you to do a consultancy for them for that gravity modeling, and you have time, they have given you deliver it in a month or whatever, or you can request for more time. Please don't hesitate. Take that assignment, sit down, look for friends. I've always told my students to reach out to me. If you have those kinds of things, you reach out to me. If I know how to do it, I'll help you. If I don't know, I'll look for some people in my networks so that we see. And that's how you learn, and that's how I personally learned. Sometimes you will find people actually approaching you, hey, request to do ABCD. In your head, you know quite well you don't know it, but approach it with a nice attitude that you say, as long as I'm given more time, I can always collaborate with Esther. And then all of us, when we put our heads together and we ask so and so, you will just find things will actually flow. And that's how you become good, because these things are through practice. You become good by doing them. The other thing is about finding correct mentors. And here I've said that, of course, we have mentors who are senior people who are possibly highly published there. But with time, what I've come to realize it, not all mentors are good mentors. And this, what to me, I think is what works for me, or this is what, if I want to make someone a mentor for me, this is what I usually look at. Or rather, this is what I've also experienced with working with some of my students. You need to look for a mentor who will be able to give you time. At least there are some of these things. For instance, you've written a journal. The first paper I published with someone who is quite senior. We wrote the paper, sent to a journal. We got a lot of comments, which I even thought the paper would actually have been rejected. It was a major, major revision. There are some comments there which I could not comprehend myself, and I could not be in a position to address them. It is now that senior person, that mentor that now comes with you. The guy sacrifices money, time, and whatever. We sit in a hotel, or I go to the office, whatever, sit down, and we go through one by one and say, here, you can address this way, this one, this way, this way, this way, this way. You can't tell me you have a mentor who does not have time to do those kinds of things. You are wasting your time. That also means sometimes as a mentor, you also be lucky to get someone who is also willing to also not only spend time, but also money. I've told you I've met people who they have to buy lunch all the times we've met, or they have to, sometimes when you send your work, as I've told you, writing is hard. You might need to send your work for proofreading. There are people who do proofreading work. One boy, you might think you know English, but you send your work to a proofreader. People who are pure, have studied English, they correct your sentence structure and whatever to just improve. And some of these proofreading services are actually expensive. And that's where I'm thinking a mentor now comes in. They now come and say, I know my student is a hustler, but I'll pay. If maybe sometimes it's 10,000 Kenya shillings, sometimes it can be as high as even 20,000. You find they actually pay for those proofreading services. That to me, I think now is the kind of mentor that you really need to look for. And then the interests, you can't look, for instance, are more into issues of international trade, then you are more into issues of, for instance, health economics and whatever. I'll be one of the worst mentors, especially if you want to become a good health economist. I don't know a lot about that field, and I will not really give much guidance as opposed to if you got a colleague who is now really into that field. Those to me are some of the things that you need to look up to. Of course, the other thing is be very aggressive. Once you've written work, the only way you can know that your work is possibly good or bad, try sending it to conferences, try sending it to some journals. If you get rejects in conferences, maybe you send to 5 of them and all of them are giving you rejects. They tell you there's possibly, there's no way 5 different people can totally see there's a problem in your work. It tells you there's something about your work. But if you send to 5, you get an acceptance in 3 out of 5 or even 1, you know you are at least on the right track. The same thing also comes with publication. And then lastly, please don't hate people who are successful. Reach out to them. There's always something that those people who are successful or have done well as researchers, there's always something that those people are doing well, maybe in their writing and whatever. That's why they are better than you. And all this, as I began, it really boils down to allot you as an individual, what you decide. When it comes to the institution, you can go to Harvard, you can go to University of Nairobi, you can go to MIT, those top universities. But a lot of the success, in my own thinking, is yourself. Some of these attributes that I've told you, how you apply them in your work, I think they're the ones which will assist you. Sometimes the school cannot do that for you. Thank you, Wambua. Back to you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much. That was very profound. I mean, both in depth and for those who maybe have joined us as on cause of uh, Majun Socrates talking, he was trying to make sense of the research space, and he mentioned very important things to do with the institution, you as a person, excellence, and areas of interest, all things to do with networking and in a more wholesale scale, how really the research space is. My next question would be, you mentioned top journals submitting to them, submitting to conferences and the likes. Uh, in research in the global south hasn't really been quite a thing, and I think we can both concede as much. And these top journals, many of them, they are foreign based, and with that brings in realities of, for example, institutional cultures where there are the Ivy Leagues of this world, and then there are others, and that boils down to really the global south. And there are these specific research cultures within that context that are marked by global dynamics, which are not really very encouraging. I mean, in terms of politics, quote unquote, we also have existential realities, which, for instance, might limit the scope of research. How do we address these challenges as academic researchers that are brought about by things which really we can't control? What do we do then?
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll start by saying that we all know how miners usually take a lot of time to access gold. Finding gold is not easy. It is the same idea or the same approach that someone needs to take when it comes to the top journals. It is just the same way, and it happens in society. It's just the same way here in the country. For instance, joining schools like Alliance, It's not easy. You really have to really work very, very hard to join those kinds of leagues. So that said, of course, there are own bureaucracies that are usually there. Let me start by possibly saying what we can do to get to some of these top journals, at least what I've seen, and possibly also talk about some of the challenges that we face, and then some of them, if I have an answer, I'll try and say. If I don't have, I'll say possibly. You now see how you go about it. So a lot of top journals, it's upon you to, to read. When it comes to journals, it's upon you to read or take time to really understand the methodology or the idea behind the journal. There are journals which are more into application. There are journals which are more into theory. There are journals which are more into both of them. So it is very, very vital from the onset. If, for instance, today you wanted to target the American Economic Association or Journal of Political Economy, it's upon you to go look at the scope of this journal. Once you say, okay, let's say my work is now within the scope. The next step is to now look at what is the quality of the papers that get accepted in this journal. And that tells you, you have to download some of their works, look at them. If your quality has not reached that level, please just be realistic. Don't waste your time sending your work there, and you know quite well you'll get rejected. So that's one of the key things. But from what I know, especially with top journals, is most of them are theoretically based, which means you are more or less making a theoretical contribution. Sadly, that sometimes comes down to the quality of education you've accessed. So another sad thing is, and this boils down to what I'm telling you, I attend classes, I ask students, what expectations do you have of me? Guys, I want to pass exams. Those are the kind of stories a student at the University of Nairobi is really telling me. But some of these universities, you have people who are more into this, the theoretical modeling. For instance, your lecturer is Robert Solo. That is now your professor. He will try and mold you towards thinking towards being a good theoretical modeler and whatever, because that's what these journals actually want, that kind of innovation and whatever. That's what these journals want. So that's one of the reasons why we hardly get our work in those places, because they require really, really thorough theoretical modeling. The other side now is the quality of data that you also use. Those journals are quite key on the quality of data that you use. So for instance, my understanding is there's been this tendency that most papers which have been written on household level or purely microeconomic topics collect their data using a method called randomized control trials, the behavioral economics methods. So it means that if you really want to aim to publish in some of those places, ensure that your data is collected using RCT, randomized control trials and whatever. Because if you doubt it, you go and see papers which are being accepted there. What kind of model are they really applying? And most likely you'll find that's the model that is being applied. So these are some of the things that I'm just trying to mention. You really have to, especially with a lot of top journals, that's what these journals do. Now, with realities that face a lot of us is, now in Africa, there are a lot of things sometimes you cannot control. Number one, you've seen here, I have a problem of a blackout. That's why you guys cannot see me. Your colleagues in North America, the US, or these advanced countries, to them, having a blackout is news. These are some of the challenges you are born here and you find this is what I'm working with. Then number two, which is quite key, is funding. Because at the end of the day, you also don't want to be just seated there and you are really suffering. That's why you have a lot of our academicians who are more into consultancy world than purely writing papers for journals. That aspect of funding. But then as for a good number of us, especially young people, some of the things you can do to forego some of these challenges. And the things I've seen working for me is when you have, for instance, fellowships, because fellowships are very good for academicians. When you see a fellowship, I don't know, the World Bank is calling for a fellowship, IMF is calling for a fellowship, or there are fellowships which are just maybe situated within certain areas, for instance, the issues of trade, please apply for them. Because some of these fellowships you find, when they accept you, they also fund your research and whatever. So your problem will no longer be about money. When you are funded, your work is just to sit down and actually read. And yeah, I'm thinking the aspect of purely just funding is a key thing. And sometimes with good funding, it also helps you to get good data. For instance, I've said to get to some of these top journals, you really need to have good data. You can be able to collect good data, because without that good data, you cannot get your work in some of these journals. Number two, you can also attend some, with a good funding, you can also attend some trainings, which means it will improve your methodological skills. So when it comes to some of these journals which are quite key on the methodology you apply, they find you are bumper to bumper with the guys there. So in a nutshell, that means if you can try and apply these things, because I've gone to conferences where I've met people who have just studied within our universities in Africa here. Within our university here, University of Nairobi, and someone has published in some of these top journals. But when you talk with them, now it's because they have tried to apply some of these things, they ensure that they have improved their methodology, they have also improved their data. And then lastly, to get to those places, network, get a colleague from these top universities, and then you collaborate with them. Because through the two of you, or three, or whatever, you can easily get your work there. And I must really reiterate, the first time when we are young, possibly we are not keen on some of the things. Please, when you go to conferences, today Wambua, you've been sent to a conference in the US. Be a bit wise. Don't just be happy. It's now the first time I'm going to the US. If it's your first time, it's the first time I'm boarding a plane, and you want to tell your village how you've really succeeded. Look beyond that. In that meeting, you have someone who has won a Nobel Prize. You have a student who was at Harvard. You have a student who is at MIT. These are the people you need to network with. And sure, after that meeting, you have exchanged contacts, or you are in communication with that person at Harvard and whatever, because these people are in places which are likely to help you get funding. And they're also in places, most likely their strength is in methodology and whatever, because that's how they have been taught. You co-author with them. Please, when you go to conferences, yes, it's happy, you've gone to the US, it's the first time. Put that aside and look at the big picture. Ensure you leave that place and you at least that kind of networking, because some of the places I've managed to some of the things that have helped me forego some of these funding problems is by going to some of these conferences. You meet with some of the colleagues in these kind of places. When you see a call for proposals, you say, okay, guys, can we apply together? And then most likely using their names, we will get that thing. You'll get that funding, and that's how you improve yourself. So I hope I've offered solutions, Wambua, practical solutions. That's my response to your question.
Yeah, I mean, you have that was quite elaborate. The other thing is now we have the funding. I mean, this is hypothetical. We have the funding, we have the know-how, we have the paper ready, our academic research is intact. Um, how then is this impactful? I mean, for example, I mean, if you are talking in terms of policy, uh, I mean, there are tons of research, for example, and just the other day, Professor Daramagot was complaining that uh, some of the academic research has been turned to pure academic thought. Uh, so what's the my question now is what's the impact of this research, and or have we just neglected it for you, the people in the academy?
The impact is there, and let me once again be hopefully give an answer which is a bit realistic. The impact is there, but the thing that is there is, as an academician, as I said, for instance, today when the University of Nairobi does my metrics so that I get a promotion or they are assessing me, one of the key performance indicators is, Socrates, how many journal papers have you published? So the thing that is there is, our work as an academician is to strive to get your work in good journals, because there's a high chance if you get your work in a good journal, there are very many people who read your work. And how it happens, Wambua, is the same way. Sorry if you're not a big fan of Diamond, I'm a very big fan of Diamond. This guy sings a song today, posts it, I don't know, in 12 hours, the guy is getting millions of views. It's because people are following this chap. And it also happens the same way, especially when you publish in very good places. That, in short, means that your fellow academicians are also reading your work, and that's how they're also able to get to see it. Number two, to get your work impactful is, and this comes back to that question of yours where you are asking whether this work is purely just to win awards or whatever. One of the reasons why we are highly encouraged to also attend conferences and present our works widely. There are a lot of conferences which have a mixture of both policymakers and also academicians. That's where those people also get ideas. You'll often hear a lot, possibly in Africa, we are not seeing it a lot, but you'll often find in advanced countries like the US and whatever, someone who becomes like the central bank governor there, whatever they call the Federal Bureau, is usually a top-rated macroeconomist, someone who has written on monetary economics. Someone who becomes, for instance, the CS for treasury and whatever is usually someone who is someone who is public economist, pure a professor who has written and they are picked from class to come and really apply. So that tells you that people are recognizing the work of this person. It's actually impactful. And the other thing is, people usually get Nobel Prizes because of the works that you've done. You don't get a Nobel Prize because of ABCD. Nobel Prize is awarded the way the Ballon d'Or are awarded. It means your colleagues have read your work and they feel, yeah, Wambua, out of 1,000 people, almost 80-90% of them think Wambua's work is quite impactful and it has really been applied. For us young people, the thing you need to also strive is to see how you can get your works into networks like the World Bank and the IMF, because a lot of the people, the World Banks and the IMFs and some of these organizations deal with directly are policymakers, government officials. Today, if the CS for Treasury is told something by the IMF, is likely to take it seriously. The same thing also a CS for another ministry. How best can you work to network or get yourself to those kinds of places so that when you do your research here, it's not only appearing in journals, but you are meeting with the real policymakers and they're implementing what you are saying. Thank you. That's my response to that answer. To that question, sorry.
Thank you. There you have it, folks. Academic research is impactful in those variety of ways. As we wind up, I see our time is far much spent, and I would maybe want you to comment on the research visibility itself. Uh, how do we access this research once it's out there? You'll find that, for example, in some journals, they will offer free access. In others, you have to sort of have a premium for you to access the research. And this makes it rather removed from readership, for example, and this is related directly to the research being impactful. How do we make our academic research visible?
Okay, thank you very much. There are two ways you can make your academic research visible. Number one if you purely want it to be seen by a lot of people, or even yourself, if you really want to know a lot of academic research in a certain area, this is what I do for myself. I believe possibly a good number of us know Google Scholar. When you go to Google Scholar, you can follow certain people, just the same way we have Facebook and whatever. You can follow certain people so that you keep getting updates. So, for instance, my own research, there are certain specialists or certain academicians who are followed on Google Scholar, and I receive, I think, notifications around 3 times, and these notifications indicate whether they have published any new work, people who have cited their work, and any works which are somehow related to theirs. This helps you keep abreast of any new knowledge that is actually coming up. And there's a high chance that any works which are related to that person you're following are relevant to what you're doing. And that comes down to you knowing what's the area of interest. So on to what you've asked about free access. So journals have 2 ways. When you want to publish there are journals which are free access, which means depending on their condition, possibly if someone was in a university or their institution or whatever which funded that research to be open access, any one of us can actually access it. And then there are this now a majority which are closed because those journals also want to make money from your work. I believe anyone who has been in my classes here, I've told them how to access the papers. There's a way you can access those papers which I'll be a bit restrained. I don't want it to be recorded. I might easily be accused. But please, if you are having challenges accessing the papers, you reach out to me via email. I'll give you tips on how to access them. Or for the benefit of all of us, possibly Esther or Wambua, you reach out to me, then I'll give you steps of how to access those papers informally. Then you'll share with the participants. Yeah, but it's possible to access them.
Thank you. That would be really great, and I'm quite sure all our participants would appreciate such a gesture. Uh, at this point in time, I'd like to open the floor to 1 or 2 few questions from the participants. And there is one in the chat box, if I may read it to you kindly. It reads, Socrates, what kept you going when you felt like giving up? We have students feeling various challenges at both school and family settings. How does one rise above them and shine? That is by Esther Ngendo.
Thank you very much for that question. Number one thing, what I must admit, in academia, just like in any other field, you must be resilient. It takes time. I've told you it takes time. And a clear illustration I told you, maybe you might not believe it. That meeting in Morocco where I went to, the Nobel Prize was there. I saw what my colleagues were presenting. And for once, I was seated in a room asking myself, have you ever been in a room like that? How did this table get into this room? This big table, how did it? You totally switch off. That happens to me. And it can happen to anyone. Sometimes you feel your quality has not really reached to those kinds of levels. But what has happened to me, or what worked for me, is the attitude. You should always remember, there's a time even Usain Bolt, who is the greatest sprinter we know, there's a time he had a false start. These people have even had their own failures. Some of these Nobel Prize winners, when they tell you their stories, they send their works here, they were rejected. But they kept going. You can't really afford to really give up. That's something that you really have to work on yourself. Number two, always know that sometimes people who do work which is good, it's because they have more information that you don't have. Actually, to me, that's the key thing that I believe is the undoing for a lot of us who are especially schooling here in Africa. You can't compare yourself with a student who is, for instance, in a class of David Roma. This is one of the best macroeconomists. he is he's an influence in the field of macroeconomics, and then you are not exposed to as much as those kinds of people. So sometimes you really have to also forgive yourself. You just did your best with the best that you knew, and that's why you really need to strive so much. Send your works to journals, send your works to conferences, the comments that you receive there, the networks that you make. Those are the things that now build you. You now start reaching those kinds of levels that they have reached. The advantage that you have for you is that you are used to working hard on your own. All you need is that information. There's that information asymmetry. That's why those people are getting there, and you are not getting there. You just need to see the way of cutting that information and being with these people in a similar setup. So the other thing is one of the key signals that will possibly help you know that you are possibly going towards the right direction. And these what are some of the signals that I use myself. You are here, you've tried to read from the top journals, you've now tried to also ask around, but now you send some of your works to some of these conferences, which are quite nice. And if you go to my personal website, you'll see I've listed some of the conferences which occur annually. Please keep looking at them. Look at some of the past papers which have been presented there. Look at some of the profiles of some of the people who are there, who are presented there. That will give you a hint and what is the standards and whatever that you need to reach. So one of the key yardsticks that or telltale signs that will tell you are almost on the right track, Esther, is if you send some of your works to those journals and they actually get accepted, yeah, you know you are working in the right place. Or you send your work to a journal, it's very hard for you to get minor comments in a journal. It's very hard, but you get major comments, which means a review and a submission. To me, that gives you a hint that you're actually walking on the right path. Because these things I'll tell you is practice, practice, practice. You can't afford to continue practicing. I hope I've adequately answered the question. Back to you, Wambua.
Yeah, thank you, Esther, and the rest of us. There you have it. There's also another question. It reads, it's by Nationalist Mbuga. How can we utilize these academic research skills for those of us who wish to go into the corporate world?
Okay, thank you very much. There are things. My hope is that when you go into the corporate world, and my understanding is the way economics is structured, it tends to push people towards more of research work. So my expectation is that even if you're in the corporate world, you are somewhere in a space where you are either writing reports or doing some impact evaluation, some analysis here and there. So which means it's just for you to understand what is the audience in that corporate field actually. What does the audience want? For instance, some of this audience does not require a lot of those hard jargon. Can you know how to write the language specifically for that kind of audience? So that when you come to academia, you really have to understand. And it also happens even in the same academic research. When you look at conferences, for instance, there is a conference like the Econometric Society conference that is more of a theoretical. If you don't have a very nice theoretical paper, there's a high chance you might feel out of place in such a conference. And then you come to other conferences where I've gone to, they are more of application. People are more interested in what Wambua did you get, what are your results, and whatever, how do you apply them? So you have to really, really understand your audience. And then that also means you really have to understand what skills are relevant for that audience. For instance, my understanding a lot with NGO and this corporate world, maybe they might not need a lot of those hard econometrics. I don't know, you did probit, logits, and whatever. Possibly they just need an understanding of can you generate some pie charts, some bar charts, some simple measures of measures of the means and the modes and whatever. can you really understand? Because that will serve well in that kind of environment. So you have to understand what those people really want. And when you come to academia, now academicians will want to look at something else. But I'm thinking the writing skills and whatever, the idea is the same, is just that the language is the one which differs, and maybe you might not need a lot of very hardcore research analysis as opposed to if you're in academia. Thank you.
Thank you, Socrates, for that. Uh, there is also another one.
Yes, please.
I heard you say, this is John Nyawa, you've been offering classes on research. How can one have access to these classes? They any qualifications? I assume John Nyawa is not a student, perhaps. And yeah, go ahead.
Um, Actually, I've not been offering classes. What I've been doing is, those of you who've been in my classes, I've always asked myself as a teacher, at the end of the day, do I just want students to only get S? Do I just want Wambua to get an A? Yet I know the real world will require Wambua to actually have the writing skills and whatever, because those are some of the challenges I faced when I completed my undergraduate. And one of the professors who I have a lot of respect for is called Professor Jamano Mwabu, very respected there at the School of Economics. And one of those people who say it is more of an honor to have to sit in his classes. Him is one of those teachers who will comfortably mix theory and practice. So that if today I told you